A quick warning before we begin. Some history isn't meant to be disturbed. If your dog ever leads you off the trail in the Virginia wilderness and the woods go completely unnervingly silent, you should probably turn back. I didn't. And what my German Shepherd Max found under the dirt today changes absolutely everything we know about the bloodiest, most chaotic battle in American history. The camera violently shakes. The audio is a raw, chaotic mix of my own heavy boots snapping dead branches and the frantic, echoing barks of a 100-pound German Shepherd tearing through the dense underbrush. Max, wait! Heel, buddy, heel, I shout, my lungs burning as the frigid autumn air bites at my throat. It's no use. When Max locks onto a scent buried deep beneath the layers of time, the rest of the world ceases to exist for him. His thick black and tan coat is a blur moving swiftly through the encroaching twilight. The Virginia wilderness isn't just a forest. It's a sprawling graveyard. It is a dense, unforgiving tangle of second-growth timber and thorny vines that still bears the hidden scars of May 1864. You can physically feel the heavy weight of it in the air. The locals have always said the soil here is still stained with the ashes of the great fires that trapped thousands of men, Union and Confederate alike, during the horrific Battle of the Wilderness. Usually, Max is a highly disciplined trail dog, staying dutifully by my side with his golden eyes scanning the tree line. But 10 minutes ago, something shifted in him. A low, rumbling growl vibrated deep in his chest, a specific warning sound he only makes when something is horribly out of place. Then he bolted. I pushed through a thick, tearing curtain of briars, my tactical flashlight slicing frantically through the gathering fog. The beam bounces erratically off the twisted trunks of hickory and oak, creating monstrous shadows that seem to close in around me. Max! I yell again, my voice swallowed instantly by the vast, oppressive dampness of the woods. Then I hear it. Not a bark, but a frantic, desperate digging. The rhythmic, heavy sound of large paws tearing into hard-packed earth. I round a massive, rotting stump and finally catch him in the beam of my light. Max is at the base of an ancient, colossal oak tree. This tree is a survivor. Its trunk is massive, easily 8 feet across, its roots bulging out of the forest floor like the gnarled, arthritic fingers of a giant gripping the earth. Max is wedged tightly between two of these massive roots, his front paws moving like pistons. Dirt, dead leaves, and century-old moss are flying through the air in a dark cloud behind him. He's whining, a high-pitched sound of pure, unadulterated obsession. Hey, easy boy, back up. I slide to my knees beside him, dropping my heavy canvas backpack into the wet leaves. The sharp scent of freshly turned loam and decaying wood fills my nostrils. Max shoves his dark snout deep into the hole he's excavated, inhaling sharply, searching for the source. I wrap my arm around his broad chest and gently pull him back. Sit, stay, I command, my voice trembling slightly from the adrenaline rush. He obeys but barely. His body is completely rigid, muscles tense, his gaze locked dead center on the dark pit he just created. I pull off my heavy leather glove, shining the flashlight directly into the hole. The earth here is black and dense, compressed by over a century and a half of rain, snow, and silence. I reach my bare hand into the freezing dirt, my fingers carefully probing the damp soil. At first there is nothing, just rocks and roots. But then, about a foot down, my fingertips brush against something that absolutely does not belong in nature. It's hard, unyielding. It feels distinctly artificial. I dig my nails in, scraping away the hardened clay, and a metallic clink echoes softly in the dead silence of the woods. My heart skips a beat. I pull my tactical knife from my belt and carefully pry the surrounding earth loose so as not to damage whatever is buried there. As I pull the object free from the suffocating grip of the tree roots, a cold shiver runs straight down my spine. I wipe a thick layer of mud off the surface with my thumb. The flashlight beam catches the dull, oxidized reflection of heavily rusted metal. It's a box. An old tin cigar box, completely fused shut by rust and time, its corners severely dented by the crushing weight of the oak tree above it. Max lets out a soft, almost mournful whimper and rests his heavy head on my knee, staring intently at the object in my hands. I look from the rusted metal to my dog, my breath plumbing in the cold beam of light. "Easy, Max," I whisper, my voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "What did you just find under this dirt?" My God, this has been buried here for over 160 years. The chill in the air didn't just bite. It sank straight into my bones. As the last bruised, purple light of the afternoon bled out of the sky, The Virginia wilderness seemed to swallow us whole. This wasn't a forest that welcomed visitors. It was a suffocating labyrinth of second-growth timber, choked with impenetrable briar patches and twisted vines that hung like nooses from the canopy. A dense fog began to roll in off the damp earth, a thick gray breath that crept around the trunks of the ancient hickory trees and slowly erased the trail behind us. I adjusted the heavy canvas straps of my backpack and swept my tactical flashlight through the gloom. The beam fractured against the mist, illuminating nothing but skeletal branches and swirling shadows. At my side, Max let out a low, vibrating growl that I felt more than I heard. His ears were pinned back, his golden eyes piercing the impenetrable darkness. He was tracking something. Not an animal. Max hunted ghosts. His nose skimmed just inches above the decaying leaves, tracing an invisible, scentless path that had been laid down over a century and a half ago. They called it the Battle of the Wilderness, I thought, my voice echoing in my mind as a silent narration to the eerie landscape. May 1864. It was less a military engagement and more a blind, bloody brawl inside a burning cage. Nearly 160,000 men collided in these very woods. The canopy was so thick that artillery was useless. Men fought hand to hand in blinding smoke. But the bullets weren't the worst part. The continuous muzzle flashes ignited the dry underbrush. A massive, terrifying fire swept through the trees, consuming the wounded where they lay. Thousands of boys in blue and gray simply vanished into the ash, their stories ending in the suffocating smoke. They were swallowed by the earth, lost to history, until today. The silence of the woods was heavy and oppressive. There were no birds, no crickets. Only the rhythmic crunch of my boots, Max's heavy panting, and the erratic, high-pitched whine of my metal detector sweeping back and forth over the uneven ground. Beep, beep. The sound was faint at first, barely registering over the wind. I dropped to one knee, the damp cold of the soil seeping instantly through my cargo pants. I brushed away a thick layer of wet, rotting leaves and black mud. My fingers brushed against something hard and unnaturally smooth. I held it up to the flashlight's beam. It was a Minié ball, a heavy, conical lead bullet used during the Civil War. But it wasn't pristine. It was violently deformed, mushroomed out from a devastating impact with a tree, or perhaps something softer. I rubbed the white oxidation off its surface, a chilling reminder of the violence that had saturated this very ground. Max sniffed the piece of lead, sneezed, and immediately pulled hard against his leash. He didn't care about the bullet. He wanted to go deeper. "Hold up, buddy," I whispered. But Max was relentless. He lunged forward, his muscular frame straining against the tactical harness. He was dragging me off the known grid, away from the old logging roads and deep into the undisturbed, perilous heart of the woods. We pushed through a dense thicket of thorns that tore at my jacket. The deeper we went, the colder it got. The temperature must have dropped 10 degrees in a matter of minutes. The fog was so dense now that I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. Sticky cobwebs clung to my face, and the gnarled roots of dead trees threatened to trip me with every step. I pulled out my vintage compass, hoping to get a bearing, but the needle began to drift lazily in circles, entirely useless, confused by the heavy iron deposits in the earth, or perhaps something else entirely. Suddenly, my metal detector let out a chaotic, shrieking tone. It spiked into the red zone before the battery indicator flashed violently, and the screen died completely. I tapped the side of the plastic housing, but it was dead. We were entirely blind, cut off from modern technology, surrounded by a suffocating darkness that held over a century of secrets. Max stopped dead in his tracks. The hair on the back of his neck stood straight up, forming a rigid black ridge down his spine. He let out another sound, not a bark, but a deep, guttural rumble of absolute certainty. He was staring directly at a massive, dark shape looming in the fog ahead. It was an ancient oak tree, its colossal roots sprawled across the forest floor like a giant petrified spider. Max didn't hesitate. He broke away from my side and charged towards the base of the tree. Whatever he had been tracking, whatever had been calling to him through the fog and the years, it was waiting right there. The temperature plummeted another few degrees as I sprinted after Max, the dead metal detector swinging uselessly from my harness. The fog was so dense now it felt like moving through physical water, but the frantic, rhythmic sound of tearing earth guided me in the dark. By the time I reached the colossal oak tree, Max was already shoulder deep between two massive gnarled roots. The sheer intensity of his digging was terrifying. His powerful paws moved in a blur, throwing a constant stream of black dirt, decayed moss, and sharp rocks into the freezing air. He wasn't just tracking a scent anymore. He was on a mission to unearth a ghost. I dropped to my knees beside him, the wet cold of the Virginia soil instantly soaking through my heavy cargo pants. "Max, easy, buddy. You're going to tear up your paws," I yelled, reaching out to pull back on his tactical harness, but he planted his feet, letting out a sharp, breathless whine that vibrated with desperate urgency. He shoved his snout deeper into the hollow he had excavated, his teeth snapping at a thick, fibrous root that was blocking his path. He wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. Something was buried beneath the very heart of this ancient tree, and the forest had kept it locked away in the dark for more than a century and a half. I pulled my high-lumen tactical flashlight from my belt and clicked it on. The harsh, white beam cut through the swirling mist and illuminated the pit. The earth here wasn't just dirt. It was a hardened shell of clay and ash, baked solid by time and the legendary fires that had once consumed the wilderness. I shoved my bare hands into the freezing muck beside Max's paws, my fingers probing blindly into the suffocating darkness. At first, there was nothing but the rigid, unforgiving wood of the tree. But then, as I dug my nails deeper under a thick, overarching root, I felt it. It wasn't a rock, it possessed a distinct, unnatural symmetry. It was cold, unnervingly solid, and utterly foreign to the organic chaos of the woods. "Hold the light," I muttered, mostly to myself, wedging the flashlight between my shoulder and my jaw. I drew the heavy tactical knife from my sheath. The blade scraped loudly against the hardened clay as I carefully chipped away the soil surrounding the object. The air grew impossibly tight. The woods around us were dead silent, no wind, no rustling leaves, absolutely nothing. It felt as though the entire forest was holding its breath, watching us peel back its oldest scar. My blade caught the edge of a thick root, and I strained against it, using all my upper body strength to pry it upward. Max whined loudly, his nose pressed right against my wrist, his ears pinned back in anticipation. With a sudden sickening crack, the root gave way. I dropped the knife, lunged forward with both hands, and grabbed the object. It was heavy, cemented into the earth by decades of moisture and pressure. I braced my boots against the base of the oak, gritted my teeth, and pulled with everything I had. With a soft, sucking sound, the earth finally surrendered its prize. I fell backward into the wet leaves, clutching the heavy mass to my chest, gasping for the freezing air. Max was instantly on top of me, sniffing frantically at the object in my hands, his tail rigid. I sat up, my hands trembling uncontrollably from the adrenaline, and wiped away a thick layer of black mud with my thumb. In the harsh glare of the flashlight, the truth finally revealed itself. It was a small rectangular metal box, an old tin cigar box, completely fused and oxidized into a deep blood-red rust. The corners were severely crushed, warped by the immense, suffocating weight of the oak tree that had literally grown over and around it for 160 years. This wasn't something dropped by a passing soldier in the heat of combat. It had been intentionally buried, deliberately hidden deep under the roots for safekeeping. My heart hammered fiercely against my ribs. I pulled my knife back out, wedging the sturdy blade directly into the rusted seam of the lid. The metal groaned, protesting the intrusion, fighting to keep its secrets in the dark. "Come on," I whispered, twisting the handle. With a sharp, metallic snap that echoed like a gunshot through the silent trees, the ancient seal broke. I carefully lifted the rusted lid. The air inside the box smelled like dried leather, dust, and something deeply, hauntingly sad. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in heavy, waterproof oilcloth, miraculously surviving the elements. As my trembling fingers peeled back the brittle layers of the cloth, a heavy brass object tumbled out, catching the light. It was an infantry button and a heavily tarnished Confederate belt buckle, but beneath them lay the true treasure. It wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, it was a single folded piece of thick paper, stained yellow by time, covered in the faded, elegant cursive of a soldier's ink. A letter that had been waiting in the dark since 1864. The rusted tin box sat empty on the wet leaves, its purpose fulfilled after 160 years of silent duty. I knelt there in the suffocating dampness of the Virginia wilderness, my breath plumbing into the cold air, completely paralyzed by what I was holding. The silence in the woods had shifted. It was no longer the heavy, threatening quiet of a forgotten graveyard. It felt hollowed out, almost sacred. Like the breathless stillness of an empty cathedral, Max seemed to feel the profound change in the atmosphere. The frantic, obsessive energy that had driven him to tear the earth apart was entirely gone. He let out a long, heavy sigh, circled once in the wet dirt, and lay down quietly, resting his large chin across my muddy boot. His golden eyes never left the fragile bundle in my hands. My hands were shaking so violently that I had to rest my forearms on my knees to steady them. The paper was incredibly brittle, the edges crumbling slightly against the calluses of my thumb. It was a miracle of nature that the oilcloth and the tight seal of the cigar box had preserved it at all. I adjusted the beam of my tactical flashlight, casting a stark white glow across the yellowed parchment. The ink had faded to a pale, ghostly brown, but the looping, elegant cursive of a mid-19th century hand was still startlingly legible. I cleared my throat, the sound incredibly loud in the dead woods, and began to read aloud, my voice breaking over the syllables. May 6th, 1864. To whoever should find this earth disturbed. I am Private Elias Vance, 4th Virginia Infantry. If you are reading these words, I pray to God Almighty you are a Union man, for it means you have found the boy. I stopped, my heart hammering a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. I looked down at the tarnished Confederate belt buckle lying in the dirt, then back to the letter. The woods are entirely consumed by the devil's own fire. The smoke is so thick a man cannot see his own hands, and the screams of the trapped will haunt whatever days the Lord has left for me. An hour passed, I came upon a Yankee boy, no older than 16. Pinned beneath a burning hickory limb, his leg was crushed, his rifle gone. He looked at me expecting the bayonet, for we are enemies in this terrible war. But in the firelight, he looked exactly like my younger brother Thomas, who fell at Gettysburg. A thick lump formed in my throat, choking off my air. The terrifying reality of the Battle of the Wilderness, the blinding smoke, the friendly fire, the horrific woodland inferno that burned wounded men alive, suddenly wasn't just a paragraph in a dusty history book anymore. It was real. It had happened right here, exactly where my knees were planted in the dirt. I swallowed hard and continued, my voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. I could not leave him to the flames. I dragged him to the base of this great oak, clear of the brush. I have given him the last of my water, bound his leg with my own shirt, and left him all my rations. He is unconscious but breathing. I buried this box with my buckle and button so that if a northern patrol finds him, they will know a Confederate spared him, and perhaps they will show the same mercy to a southern boy someday. I must return to my regiment. May God forgive us for what we have done to each other in these woods. The letter ended there. No signature, just the abrupt, desperate halt of a man rushing back into a burning hellscape. I slowly lowered the paper, resting the back of my head against the massive, unyielding trunk of the oak tree. The sheer weight of the history pressing down on me was suffocating. For over a century and a half, historians have written about the unrelenting savagery of the Wilderness Campaign. They wrote about the brutal hand-to-hand combat, the uncontrollable fires, and the sheer volume of blood soaked into this Virginia clay. But they didn't know about Elias Vance. They didn't know that right here, in the darkest, most terrifying epicenter of the fighting, a Confederate soldier had risked his own life and faced court-martial or death to save a teenage enemy he had been ordered to kill. Tears I didn't realize I was holding back spilled over, cutting warm tracks through the freezing mud smeared across my cheeks. I looked down at Max. My loyal, brilliant dog had smelled something we couldn't. He hadn't just found a rusted box or a piece of forgotten metal. He had unearthed a profound, desperately needed testament to human decency. For decades, the agonizing truth of what Elias did under this tree had been screaming silently in the dark. No one knew what had happened to them. But now, because a German shepherd refused to stop digging in the freezing mud, their story finally had a voice. I remained kneeling in the damp Virginia soil for a long time, the brittle, yellowed letter resting gently in my palms. The crushing, oppressive weight that had choked these woods for the past few hours had entirely vanished, replaced by a profound, reverent stillness. It was as if the forest itself had been holding its breath for 160 years, desperately waiting for someone to finally listen. And now at last it could exhale. Beside me, Max let out another long, quiet sigh. The frantic, primal energy that had driven him to tear through the hardened clay was completely gone. He rested his massive head heavily against my knee, his golden eyes blinking slowly in the darkness. He didn't know about the Civil War. He didn't understand the bitter divide between the Union and the Confederacy, or the unimaginable horrors of the Wilderness Campaign. But he understood humanity. He possessed an uncanny, instinctual ability to sense the lingering echoes of intense emotion, and beneath this ancient oak tree, he hadn't found hatred or violence. He had found an echo of profound, desperate compassion. I gently folded Private Elias Vance's letter along its original fragile creases, treating it with more reverence than I would a bar of solid gold. I wrapped it back into the dry, protective embrace of the decaying oilcloth, laying it carefully at the bottom of the rusted tin cigar box alongside the tarnished Confederate belt buckle and the brass infantry button. I secured the crushed lid, pressing it down firmly, before sliding the entire artifact into a hard-shell protective case inside my tactical backpack. This didn't belong to the dirt anymore. It belonged to the light. It belonged in a museum, where the world could finally know the name of the man who chose mercy over murder in the absolute darkest pit of hell. As I zipped up my heavy canvas pack and slung it over my shoulder, the environment around us began to shift. The impenetrable, suffocating blackness of the night slowly gave way to a bruised indigo twilight, and then a pale, golden light began to filter through the skeletal canopy. The dense, chilling fog that had isolated us from the modern world began to lift, dissolving into the crisp morning air. The sun was rising over the wilderness, washing away the shadows of the past. "Come on, Max," I whispered, my voice hoarse but steady. I reached down and patted his broad, muscular shoulder. "Let's go home, buddy. You did good today. You did really good." Max scrambled to his feet, shaking the thick black mud from his coat. His ears perked up, and for the first time since we had entered these haunted woods, his tail gave a soft, rhythmic wag. He took the lead, navigating the twisted roots and briar patches with practiced ease, guiding us back toward the faint outline of the old logging trail. The walk back felt entirely different. We weren't trespassers, stumbling through a graveyard anymore. We were messengers bringing a lost soul back to the world. As we finally broke through the dense tree line and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder of the main road, the full, brilliant warmth of the morning sun hit my face. I stopped, taking a deep, grounding breath of the clean air, and looked directly into the camera lens. "We walk over history every single day of our lives," I said, looking out at the vast expanse of the Virginia woods behind me. "We pave over battlefields, we build our homes on top of forgotten secrets, and we naturally assume that because the people are long gone, their stories have vanished with them. But they haven't. Time can bury almost anything, bullets, uniforms, and the bones of fallen men. But truth has a way of waiting beneath our feet. History never truly disappears. It only waits for someone brave enough, or in my case, a dog stubborn enough to uncover it." Today wasn't a story about how men fought and died. It was a story about how, when the world was literally burning down around them, one man chose to save his enemy. I looked down at Max, who was happily sniffing a patch of tall grass in the sunlight. What do you guys think about the incredible secret Max uncovered today? Do you think that young Union boy survived the war to tell his family about the Confederate soldier who spared his life? Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you want to follow us into the next forgotten place and see what history we dig up next, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.